Blind Citizens Australia proudly presents the An Eye to the Future Job Ready Workshop Series. A positive mindset towards the job search. Hosted by Blind Citizens Australia.
So, thank you all for taking the time to join us, and we are really excited to get going with today's topic. Before we jump in, I'm just going to run through a few bits of housekeeping, and then we will start with our welcome to country. So please say your name when you speak. The chat function has been disabled, and please mute yourself when not speaking, which we just discussed a moment ago. So to mute on a computer, you can select the mute icon in the bottom left hand of your screen or press Alt-A. So hold Alt, then press A. And to mute on a phone, select the mute icon in the bottom left of your screen or press *6. So you may choose to have your camera on, but it is not a requirement. So whatever you're comfortable with. Please raise your hand if you would like to contribute to the conversation. And to raise your hand on a computer, use the keyboard command Alt+Y. And to raise your hand on a phone, it's *9. Please note that this session is being recorded and it will be made available on the Eye to the Future website. So please just take this into consideration when making contributions and asking questions. Okay, so I am now going to open our workshop with our welcome to country. I acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands that we are all coming from today for this physically dispersed meeting. I am coming to you from the Gadigal lands of the Eora Nation, and I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people of Australia. As we gather for this physically dispersed meeting, let us take a moment to reflect upon the meaning of place, and in doing so, recognise the various traditional lands on which we gather today. Okay, so my name is Claire. I am a project officer with Eye to the Future. With us today, we have my colleague, Maddie, who is also a project officer with Eye to the Future, and our guest speakers, Gary and Raj, who will be sharing with us today their journey to developing a positive mindset towards the job search. An Eye to the Future is an initiative from Blind Citizens Australia, funded through the Department of Social Services. And it recognises the career potential of people who are blind or vision impaired. So we support job seekers with job readiness, including approaching the job search, resume and cover letter application, interview techniques, and we can also offer those one-to-one discussions about the topic we are going to cover today. We also support employers to think differently about their recruitment, and we support employers to hire someone who is blind or vision impaired. So this can include support for employers to create an accessible recruitment process, education and awareness for their teams, assistive technology where applicable, and we also check in with the employer and employee as they settle into the workplace. So for those of you who joined us last year, in 2023, we ran a series of workshops on the topics of disclosure with confidence, approaching job applications with confidence, and interviewing with confidence. And these sessions are available on our website to view, and we invite you to explore those at your leisure. So today we are going to discuss engaging in the job search with a positive mindset, including overcoming barriers and creating networks. So let's get started. Okay. So you've come along to this workshop today, and we really hope you get something out of this session. Attending this session is a really good first step in starting to think about the job search. What we hope you'll leave with today is insights and perspectives from some of our job seekers, as well as some practical strategies that we will share from a mindset self-help tool, all of which we hope you will keep in mind in your approach towards your future employment opportunities. It's really important to remember when it comes to the job search and when it comes to your career, the most invested person in your career opportunities is you. And the most capable person for overcoming any barriers is you. And the two guest speakers we have today have worked closely with an eye to the future and demonstrated great commitment and problem-solving skills when it comes to that job search. At An Eye to the Future, we work with job seekers to support them to reframe the job search and approach it with that positive mindset and confidence. Once you've registered with An Eye to the Future, we will have a one-to-one discussion with you about your education and employment history, the possibilities, barriers, and future direction and support, and help you to review and update your resume in preparation for the job search. We will also support you to identify opportunities of interest and create a suitable application, and in time, work with you as you settle into your future role. Okay, so I am going to hand over now to Maddie and our guest speakers. Over to you, Maddie.
Fantastic. Thank you, Claire, and thank you everyone for joining us today for this workshop. My name is Maddie, and I'm one of the project officers with An Eye to the Future, working with job seekers to engage in and succeed in the job search. Today, we're excited to introduce our guest speakers, Gary and Raj, who have both been working with An Eye to the Future and both demonstrated a positive mindset towards the job search that has led to creating opportunities for their future. And we hope that you can take away some insights from the discussion today to apply towards your own job search. So before we get into our interview and asking questions with Gary and Raj, I will give them an opportunity to introduce themselves. So Gary, over to you. Would you like to briefly introduce yourself?
Yes, it's Gary Adler. I am probably now regarded as an older person, but I don't call myself old. I just say that because I've had quite a wealth of experience, and one of the things that I've done is got into the peer group, which I'll sort of mention a bit later. But I was born in New Zealand. I moved to Australia when I was about 23, 24. And I worked in both countries, and I recently retired. And I won't bore you too much with too much else, but essentially, I just sort of feel this is a very worthwhile project.
Thank you, Gary, and we'll learn more about your journey and your story as we go through these questions, but I wouldn't say you're older, you've just got experience behind you. Raj, over to you. Would you like to briefly introduce yourself?
Hey everyone, thank you for joining, and thank you for the BCA team for hosting the event. So as Maddie and Claire said, my name's Raj, 28 years old. I actually recently lost my vision in November 2022. So had 100% vision beforehand, and yeah, I have optic neuritis, which made me lose 100% of my vision since then. And yeah, I'm currently a business analyst and very happy to be here.
Fantastic. Thank you, Raj. And we will go into our brief interview now. And we'll start with Gary, and we'll run through some questions to get to know Gary's story and how he has applied a positive mindset to his job search, taken initiative throughout the job search for success that has led to a career. So Gary, before approaching the job search, how did you assess your interests, skills, and qualifications in terms of the direction you wanted to take for your career?
Okay, sorry, I will just add that I do have some sight. I was born with congenital glaucoma, which was seen early, and I've managed with a small amount of sight. I just thought I'd throw that one in.
Yes.
Basically, I left school and didn't really want to go on to university. I had friends who were going to university and doing courses that I thought weren't really up my alley. So I thought, where to from here? Fortunately, I had a placement officer, and of course, like a lot of young blind people, I wanted to be a DJ, but I was advised maybe that wasn't going to happen straight away. So it was a case of, well, where, what's out there? And I was pointed in the direction of telephony. It was a job that was actually well suited in the end. It was like a intermediary between a technician and outside faults people who had to go out and actually check the lines and things like that if there was a telephone fault. So I went in to the area concerned just to see what it was all about, and I just thought, yeah, this actually interests me. I've always had a bit of an interest in telephones and how they work, etc., etc. So I thought, this, I think, will do me. Now, I'm not going to say that I was overconfident. I would say that I knew that it would be a case of getting to know people, getting to know the job, and just ensuring that I felt comfortable with it. And the manager was very good. He was perhaps a little bit hesitant at first. He just didn't quite know how I'd manage, what sort of obstacles there'd be in the office and things like that. But I said to him, look, if you're unhappy with anything, or if there's anything you want to know, or anything I need to check with you, please don't hesitate. So I started off in that role and really enjoyed it, actually. It was great to be able to speak to people in general. There was always the customer and the technical side, and also the outside faults people too. And it's quite a fascinating role. It probably hardly exists now because of broadband and cabling. But it was a great start to my working life. I probably, after about 5 years, I had the travel bug, and I wanted to do some travel, which I did, and decided I wanted to come and live in Australia. I knew I'd have to sort of look seriously at a similar role. I did look at other roles, but I just realized better to do a role that I knew. So I went again into a telephone company, spoke to the employment service, was also with a placement officer from what was then RVIB. And similar story, the manager wasn't too sure. I again had to explain that it would be okay. I wasn't going to go tripping over desks or knocking into people or things like that. So it was, again, just gaining their confidence and they gaining my confidence, I guess. But it was, it wasn't too bad. Once things started, I felt right at home, and I did take a step backwards, essentially. The systems weren't quite the same in Australia as they were over in New Zealand. So I got into the telephony side of faults taking, which was interesting in itself because it was done differently. And I was fairly confident to begin with. I think, I always knew that it wasn't a question of how would you manage. I think it was more a question of how I'd fit in and how comfortable I'd be. So I did that job for a number of years, and then I got into customer disputes, which was where people dispute overseas calls in particular, some Australian calls too. And I learned fairly quickly that a lot of it was more to do with people's inability to pay bills and things like that. And I just had to reassure them that that was fine. They had time to pay if they needed it. I worked in that role for quite a number of years. I think it was about, let me see, 12 years, almost 13 years. And then things were starting to change, and that was to do with how calls were being brought into the country. You know, most people were dialing directly, but if you were overseas, you could dial into Australia, into a number, and get an Australian operator. So there wasn't the sort of contact that I'd been having with overseas administrations, but it was very interesting work, and I really enjoyed that. So I was then faced with what to do, because they were downsizing the area. And I looked around and got into the Foxtel side of things, because at that stage they were laying cable and also setting people up with broadband, and also people were starting to move, you know, into broadband and Foxtel and that sort of thing. And then I was faced with, well, this is going to move to Sydney in one respect. And I thought, no, it's not going to work for me. I'd bleed to death if I had to move to Sydney, financially, that is. So they offered me redundancy, which I took. And again, it was a case of not quite knowing what was coming up. I was fortunate. I had an agency I was dealing with. And one day they said, have you thought of superannuation? And of course, my immediate answer was, I'm too young for superannuation. They said, no working in superannuation. And I thought, well, let's look at it. You know, I know you have to pay it, but I didn't know much about it. And again, I went in and had a look and spoke to the manager, who also had some concerns. I think that tends to be something we all face, I suppose. But once again, I reassured the manager that everything would be okay in terms of getting around, getting on with people. And I then got into that job and really quite enjoyed it. It was certainly a change from what I had been doing, and it was a learning curve, because I really didn't know a lot about the superannuation industry. But again, through doing courses, as I'd done in previous jobs, and also complying, you know, with ASFA, which is the superannuation learning scheme, I really got to love it. And I stayed in that job for 20 years and finally retired a couple of years ago. So I have to say, in many cases, it's been good luck, but it's also been a bit of perseverance. I never say I never say I can't do it. I think I just felt that I really wanted to give it a whirl, and that's what I did. And hence, I wanted to get into the peer group, which I'll talk about when we get to another question, I guess.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that, Gary. And that sounds like it's been quite a journey that you've been on through different industries, and a lot of uncertainty in some of those times where you weren't sure what was coming up next, but you jumped in and you gave it a go and learnt on the job and followed that trail a little bit. And also, when you moved to Australia, you mentioned you took a bit of a step back in order to take a step forward. You took a step back in your career to take a step forward. And then coming into the superannuation, you said, I didn't know a lot about it. Probably wasn't my, when you were thinking about it, a dream career at first, but you got in, you gave it a go, and had what sounds like quite a successful career in that space as well. So congratulations on that journey. And then, we'll talk a little bit about what's next as well. Can you tell us about some of your initial experience of job searching with vision loss, particularly around how you maybe felt about yourself and how you thought employers might view you, and was that founded?
Yeah, look, I guess when I was younger, I was probably fairly confident, almost cocky, I suppose, in terms of believing in myself. I think I just thought, look, I didn't think it would be a breeze, but I thought, I'm sure I can talk to managers or talk to supervisors or whoever I had to deal with in terms of just gaining their confidence and feeling confident. And basically, yeah, I never really thought too much about what could happen if I didn't get the job. In most cases, I was fortunate. I think it's really a case of, self-confidence. And I always say to people, never feel that you're any worse than anybody else, sight or no sight. I think it's more to do with your ability to get on with people and your ability to work the best way you can. And that also means making sure that you get the right equipment that you need. And I will say that when I started, there wasn't the computerization there is now. But along the way, I too had some, minor battles with Telstra. Oh, sorry, I wasn't going to mention a company, was I? With a particular phone company, shall we say?
No one heard you.
Because they were a little hesitant about, screen size and all this sort of thing. And that became not a battle, but it became a bit of an irritant because it was almost as if I wasn't believed. So I was lucky to have some support from Vision Australia on that one. But look, for the most part, I'd have to say that I've never really had a major problem in terms of searching for a job. And once I got into it, I felt right at home in that role. So I stuck to telephony. And when superannuation came up, I thought, well, they'll either say no to me because they think that I just haven't got enough knowledge, or they will accept me and understand that there will be, of course, learning on the job.
Yeah, and with I guess some of the employers, particularly at the start, but throughout your career, is you mentioned you getting along with people, and you created space for open conversations with employers. I think you mentioned at the start of your can I just remind everybody to be on mute if you're not speaking? Thank you. You created opportunities for conversations, open and honest conversations with employers, with potentially colleagues as well, because it's an education opportunity.
Yeah, that's right. I think people are genuinely interested. I never really experienced any silly behavior or anything like that. Most people were pretty good. There were probably some who, when I was younger, who would say, "Oh, can you see that?" Or can you, it was a little bit like just having to say to them, "Look," and usually I took them aside and I just said, "Look, just understand I've got a reasonable amount of sight. I don't have the sight you have, but I do have reasonable sight, and that I'm okay with it. I may have to look a little closer at the screen or the work that I'm doing, but it's okay." And look, as I said, most people were pretty mature about it. There were some who weren't, but generally I was pretty much accepted. So I don't think I really had an issue there.
Yeah, absolutely. And through your job search, and though the ups and downs that you've spoken about so far and the changes, how did you motivate yourself to persist with the job search?
I think I was fortunate in that for the first job, it was through a placement officer. For the second job, I did have to motivate myself a bit because although I had someone from RVIB helping me, I did go into the employment service of the phone company itself, and explained the situation to them. And they sort of said things like, well, you're not a school leaver, and it's going to be hard for you to get into a role where you're dealing with younger people who are probably a bit faster than you, and things like that. And that, I did find that a bit irritating, but I also thought, look, there's no point in getting yourself wound up over it. I think it's just a case of persevering. And once I got into the job, nobody questioned my ability anymore or anything like that. I think they understood that I was capable of doing the job. So from that point of view, it was good. If anything, it's been more challenging now because, as I said, I retired from my previous role, but want to get back into the workforce. But I am coming across a more determined sort of barrier there, you might say. So that's me, but that doesn't mean that anyone else can't get what they want. I think it's really just a case of persevering again. I did take a bit of a knock last year. I went back to my former employer and said, look, I wouldn't mind working part-time. And my former manager was enthusiastic. New overall manager wasn't. And although the interview went quite well, I was told, no, you're not coming back. So it was a bit of a slap in the face. And I'd have to say, in my total career, that's probably the first time I've come across that. And for whatever reason, I don't know.
Yeah, but it's I guess in terms of that, since we've mentioned that situation, Gary, in terms of how you took that news and what you're doing now for your job search is when you did get that news, did you decide to focus on it or potentially move forward and see what is next? And how are you approaching that next phase of the job search?
Yeah, look, I won't deny initially I was a bit annoyed. And I looked at some options, including, going through the Ombudsman, talking to Fair Work, all that sort of thing, human rights. And in the end, I spoke to a solicitor, a disability solicitor, who said, look, do you really want to waste your energy on this? Because you could really wind yourself up. And I stopped and thought about it. I will say it all happened just before a trip I did back to New Zealand last year for my mother's 90th. So I didn't really have time to stew over it, but I did feel that I'd been unfairly treated at the time. And I probably initially thought, yes, I'd like to fight it. But when I really sat down and looked at it, I thought, no, it's probably best to move on. It's probably best to focus and just look at other options, basically.
Yeah. And how are you approaching some of those other options now, Gary, that we've recently discussed?
Yeah, well, one of the things I'm doing is looking at voluntary work, because I sort of feel that if it's possible to get into some voluntary work, and if that does lead to a position, be it part-time or whatever, I'll certainly look at it.
Absolutely. And that's a different way of approaching the job search. It's not the traditional, apply or, go through an agency to get into work, but you're looking at voluntary work in an industry that you're interested in with organizations that do offer those paid employment opportunities. With the idea that can then bring paid opportunities. So you haven't said, I'm giving up. You're going, I'm going to try this a little differently.
That's right. Yeah.
Look,
I'd never give up. I think I have had to have a look at myself at over the last few months and just say, are you expecting too much? Are you, is it that people are not looking at you as a serious prospect. But then, as I've always said, I don't believe anyone is surplus to requirements, so to speak, you know. And look, for us as visually impaired or blind people, I think it is a harder road to hoe, but it's also one where you can really develop, you know, the skill of making sure that you are upfront and that you push the points that make you a valued person, essentially.
Yes, absolutely. And there is a little bit more advocating and education for us to do along that road. And if you had 3 pieces of advice for a person with vision impairment, vision loss, starting out on the job search, what would they be? What would your 3 pieces of advice be?
Never give up, always persevere, always go in with confidence. And even if you do get a knockback, don't take it as a personal affront. Just keep at it. Probably also look for something that you're really interested in doing, because you don't want to wind up with a position that you're really unhappy with.
Yeah, yeah. And throughout your career, you've taken a lot of stepping stones. You've taken positions and moved on to the next one. Everything's been a stepping stone to get to where you ended up, and hopefully where you're going now, you'll take the next stepping stone. So thank you for sharing your journey, Gary. Really interesting, and it's been, you know, a bit of an adventure through your career. And now we're going to have a quick talk with Raj, who has his own experience to share around how he's created a positive mindset to lead to some success within the job search in the time that he has been working with vision loss. So Raj, if you're ready, before approaching the job search, how did you assess your interests, skills, and qualifications in terms of the direction you wanted to take your career, maybe pre and post vision loss?
Thanks, Maddie. Thanks, Gary. So just before my vision loss, I was actually involved with tennis. So a bit of tennis coaching, managing and directing competitions, and working for several tennis clubs around Victoria. And that was majority of my work pre-vision loss. And post-vision loss would be something where I had to, obviously, like as mentioned in my introduction, that I went from 100% to 0. So a little bit of light perception, but nothing enough to see images or kind of direct myself through any form of traffic. So tennis and anything around that was something that I had to reconsider, sorry, and figure out if that's something I can continue to do. So in terms of the job search and having a positive mindset, I would say using my qualifications that I had in terms of my bachelor's in sports management and the previous job history, and essentially figuring out what skills I could or could not use that I developed before my vision loss compared to my current situation, which is 0% vision.
Yeah. So you took, I guess, what you were working with in the past, or the skills that you developed, and what of those skills can I continue to apply now or stretch myself to use? And within the job searching side of things, how did you start to approach that job search with vision loss?
So I would say using, like you said, using my skills beforehand. Approaching the job search would currently, when I first started, was using kind of my contacts and the network that I had built pre-vision loss. So using people that I previously worked for or previously was working for, and using them as kind of as a guide to what I was capable of and whatever they trusted me with to essentially try and find work.
Yeah. So you I guess it sounds like you reached out to people that you were in contact with prior to your vision loss, and maybe explain to them a little bit about what had happened and where you were at to start getting a conversation.
Exactly. That's it.
Yeah.
Because that's yeah, like you mentioned, it's all about kind of building that pre-existing network and then using them to develop your skills.
Yeah, just to start to step forward. So
Exactly.
in your initial experiences of the job search with vision loss, tell me about how maybe you felt about yourself, and also how you felt other people would perceive you with vision loss, and whether that was supported those beliefs that you had, or were they maybe challenged and changed?
Yeah, it's a very similar experience to Gary, where most people were very understanding, and that is something that I think everyone should take away from this seminar, is that most people you meet will be very understanding and very positive towards your job search. But in case of a few difficulties, which I experienced, would be to just take away that some people aren't fully understanding of what's going on. And it's nothing against them, they're just not educated enough. So, yeah, that would be kind of my biggest takeaway, is that there are a few people that aren't fully understanding, but mostly the job search at the beginning was quite educational. And yeah, a lot of trial and error, as everything is in life.
Absolutely. And as you know, some people are understanding and other people might have some learning to do. I guess creating some of those conversations and some of that education to people, did that help with your confidence to move forward in the job search?
Absolutely. I think once you do teach people and educate people about your visual impairment, I think, yeah, once they are understanding, it's a lot easier for you to get ahead and continue to, follow your passions and work for whatever organization that you want to be part of.
Yes. Yeah. And it could be easy, with having acquired vision loss, or whether for life, it could be easy not to challenge yourself, given some of the perceptions that people might have or that you have about yourself. How did you motivate yourself to persist through some of these beliefs within the job search, considering the situation?
I'd say in terms of motivation, we're very lucky, myself, to be. So I lost my vision in 2022 in a different country, so it was quite difficult in the initial process of managing and dealing with the vision loss. But once I came back to Australia, which is home, I came to realize that all of us are very lucky to be part of such a great country, and there is a lot of help around. So using that help, I would say being quite positive was related to accepting help and being part of different communities. And something that Gary will touch on later is one of his peer connect groups is accepting help from people around you. And that's a big part of me having a positive feedback.
Yeah. So you linked into yourself, but also supports around you for some of those ideas, and where can I go next, and motivation from yourself, but also from outside.
Absolutely. So a lot of help does come from the people that you trust. But at the end of the day, you have to decide to accept the situation and move forward.
Yeah, that's some fantastic insight. So how do you approach the job search now, or where are you at now with the job search, if you're comfortable sharing that?
Yeah, absolutely. So at the beginning, like I mentioned before, there was a few difficulties, but recently I just was scrolling through a website for a job search, and I guess I developed some self-assistive self-assistive technology skills, and I just learned to navigate through a few websites that helped me find jobs. And I guess it's very similar to, and I know I'm a bit different where I had vision beforehand, so I've lost it now. So for anyone that's listening that had vision before, you can obviously, you remember a few websites and you can navigate through them. So yeah, using kind of that pre-existing knowledge and kind of the current substantive tech skills, I was able to navigate through a website and apply for a job, which I eventually got. Which, yeah, and it was quite daunting at the beginning, but as you go through the process, you realize it's very similar to any other job search.
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of leans into one of our future workshops that we'll be running. And I'll put a little plug in now, if I may, about our next workshop will be a positive mindset towards assistive technology in the job search, where we will be speaking to assistive technology providers and also people who have been exploring their assistive technology and had success with it. That will be part of our next workshop. So you've sort of leaned into that a little bit already. So thank you, Raj. If you had 3 pieces of advice for a person with vision loss starting out on the job search, what would they be?
I would say very similar to Gary's advice, which was great advice, is to not give up, believe in yourself. And the third thing, and the most important for me, would be willing to accept help. I think once you are willing to accept help, because it can be quite daunting. And me personally, I've had moments of, feeling embarrassed about my vision loss and things like that, which at the time felt very real and justified. But looking back on it now, it was, completely unreasonable. So once you are willing to accept help, I think there are a lot of people around you that want you to succeed. And I think, yeah, you should lean into that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Raj, for sharing your input and insights. There's similarities and differences between Gary and Raj, and everyone else in this room will have a different story or different journey towards employment. But I will hand back over to Claire.
Thanks, Maddie, and thank you so much, Raj and Gary, for sharing your journey with us. So, as highlighted really by what Raj and Gary have just said, it is possible to notice and to challenge and change your thoughts and feelings into more curious and positive mindsets. And over the years, we tend to get into unhelpful thinking habits, which can make real barriers seem impossible to overcome. So what we're going to do now is we're going to identify and discuss some of these unhelpful thinking habits and how to develop more positive alternatives, as Raj and Gary have done in their journey to employment, as we've just heard. So once you kind of overcome or come to notice these unhelpful thought patterns, it can help you to challenge or even distance yourself from those thoughts and see the situation in a different and more positive way. And that's what we are really aiming for when it comes to approaching the job search and your future career. So as we discuss the next 12 unhelpful thought patterns, just take a moment to reflect on whether there are any that resonate with you. Awareness can help you to navigate towards that more positive mindset when it comes to the job search. So, Maddie, did you want to kick us off with the first one?
Yes, absolutely. So the first unhelpful thought pattern is called a mental filter. And that's when we only notice what the filter wants us to notice or allows us to notice, and we dismiss anything that doesn't fit. It's like it's a beautiful sunny day with one cloud in the sky, but we focus only on the cloud. It's only catching the negative stuff in our kitchen strainers, whilst anything else that might be more positive or realistic is dismissed. For example, when we relate it to the job search, I can only do a certain type of role with very specific criteria, and dismissing anything that doesn't perfectly fit in with this filter even if, say, 70% of the job fit in with what was realistic, that small percentage that's left, we dismiss the job because that doesn't fully fit the filter. Some questions to ask ourselves to maybe break this filter. Am I generalizing and limiting my options? Or a really good one is, what would I tell my friend to do in this exact situation? A close friend, what would I tell them to do? Over to you, Claire.
Another unhelpful thinking habit is judgment making. And this is really about making negative or unfounded evaluations or judgments about events, ourselves, others, or the world, rather than what we actually have evidence for. So an example of this might be that I had a negative experience with, say, one branch of supermarket chain. So I will never work for any supermarket in Australia because they're all the same. They're all bad. And when these kind of unhelpful thinking habits come up, it's really important to ask yourself questions like, what's the evidence for and against this thought? And are there alternative ways to look at this situation?
The next one is mind reading. And that's assuming that we know what other people are thinking, usually about us. For example, if I apply for this job, they will think that because I am blind, I cannot competently use a computer. They probably think that I'm a risk in the workplace, so there's no point in applying. These people might not be thinking that at all, but we believe we can read someone's mind, and that's the filter that we're applying. Is thinking this way, some questions, is thinking this way helping or inhibiting me? Can we ever really know what someone else is thinking? Is there a situation in the past where you thought someone was thinking something bad about you and you later found out that they were not thinking these things about you at all? Or maybe they weren't thinking about you in that situation? Claire.
Another unhelpful thinking habit is called emotional reasoning. And it's really that thought that comes up as, I feel bad, so it must be bad. Or, I feel anxious, so I must be in danger. And an example of this might be, I made a phone call to inquire about a job that was advertised. I was nervous on the call and stumbled over my words a bit, and now they won't want to interview me. So there's really no point in applying anyway. And when those types of thoughts come to mind, it's important to really take a moment and ask yourself, what's the worst that could realistically happen? And also, what's the best that could realistically happen? And remind yourself, it is natural to feel nervous. And in this situation, what would you tell a friend?
So the next one is prediction believing, similar to mind reading. We think we know what's going to happen in the future. For example, when applying for a role within an organization we have no experience with before, thinking, what if their offices are not accessible? What if they've never worked with someone who's blind or vision impaired before? What if they don't make adjustments for me? And some questions to challenge some of these thoughts is, am I playing a game of what if? And how helpful is this? Or is this situation really in my control? And how can I contribute to a positive outcome?
Another unhelpful thinking habit is what we kind of term as mountains and molehills. And this is really about exaggerating the risk of danger or the negatives and minimizing the odds of how things are most likely to turn out, or minimizing those positives in a situation. So an example might be, I am thinking of applying for a role with a small organization that I know has never worked with someone who is blind before. So they won't be able to support me. And in thinking this way, I am potentially dismissing my own opportunity to have an open conversation with the employer around how to support me in their workplace. And so to challenge that kind of thinking when it arises, ask yourself again, what's the worst that could realistically happen? And would that be so bad? You can also ask yourself, is thinking this way helping or making the situation worse?
So the next is compare and despair. Seeing only the good and positive aspects in people and situations and comparing ourselves negatively against them. So we see the good things that other people are doing and saying, I'm not there, I'm not good enough. For example, seeing your friends and colleagues succeed in their career paths and comparing your current situation to theirs without considering the life experiences and your achievements to date, which are different to theirs. Some questions to ask ourselves to challenge this is, are there other explanations other than blaming myself? Are there any alternative views to this situation?
Another unhelpful thinking habit is what we call catastrophizing. And this is really about imagining and believing that the worst possible thing will happen. So, for instance, I have applied for a job and be offered an interview, but I don't believe I will be offered the role, and it will be a waste of my time to attend the interview. So to kind of challenge this catastrophizing thought habit, it's really important to take a moment and ask yourself, how likely is it that this will actually happen? And what good could come of attending an interview anyway, whether you're offered the job or not? You can also ask yourself, how have I overcome similar thoughts like this in the past?
So the next is being critical of ourselves, putting ourselves down, self-criticism, blaming others, blaming ourselves for events or situations that are not totally our responsibility. Thinking negatively about yourself and your abilities, such as, I have vision loss and therefore I won't be able to follow my desired career path, or I haven't succeeded in the past and that's because I'm not as good as other people. And some questions. What would I tell a friend in this situation? Are there any other explanations other than blaming myself?
Black and white thinking is another one of those unhelpful thinking habits. And it's really believing that something or someone can only be good or bad, right or wrong, rather than anything in between, or what we call those shades of gray. So, for example, it may be that I will only apply for the CEO role and I will not accept anything less, even though there are other opportunities that act as stepping stones towards my desired role. So, to challenge this type of thinking, you can ask yourself, what alternative views are there? And what other outcomes would also be desirable?
And the second last habit we have is shoulds and musts. Thinking or saying, I should or I shouldn't, and I must puts pressure on ourselves and can set up some unrealistic expectations. For example, putting pressure on yourself based on societal expectations. For example, I'm 40 and therefore I should have achieved a management role by now, so I must get there this year, otherwise I'm a failure. I should have achieved as much as my high school peers by now. And a question to ask yourself is it really true that I should, must, or have to, or are we each on our own journey?
And finally, the last unhelpful thinking habit we're going to discuss today is around memories. So, current situations and events can trigger upsetting memories, leading us to believe that the danger is here and now rather than in the past. And it can cause us anxiety or distress in the moment. So, an example of this might be that in the past, I found the platform at my educational institute inaccessible, which was upsetting and frustrating at the time. And I am now being reminded of that in my current job search online and beginning to feel some of those same feelings again, despite all the upskilling I have done since that time. So if that's the case, take a little moment and ask yourself, am I overgeneralizing from past occurrences? And how have I successfully navigated difficult similar situations in the past? So taking time to explore these questions, to build an awareness of your thoughts, feelings, and mindset towards the job search will help you to approach the job search with confidence and resilience. It's worth remembering that your vision might change over time, which might necessitate exploring alternative career options at different stages of your working life. And thankfully, the skills and knowledge that we acquire throughout life are transferable across various settings and roles throughout our careers. So that really brings us to the end of today's content. And as a reminder, we are accepting expressions of interest for our program to support job seekers with your mindset towards the job search. I believe we're probably out of time for Q&A today, but if you do have any questions, we will be sending out an email with a feedback survey in it, and feel free to respond to that email with any questions you may have, and we would happily pass them on to Gary and Raj. Gary also put a hook in here. Gary also runs a Peer Connect group with BCA around the journey to employment on every third Tuesday of the month, and we'll put some details around that Peer Connect group in the follow-up email from this workshop too, so you can contact Gary via that means as well. So this was the first workshop in a series of 3, and we warmly invite you to join our next workshop on February the 29th at 10 a.m, which will explore a positive mindset towards assistive technology in the workplace, which Maddie touched on earlier. And our third and final workshop in this series will be held on the 4th of April, and will focus on a positive mindset towards creating your future career opportunities. And that will really include assessing your skills, abilities, and interests, and addressing the gaps to set yourself up for more success in the workplace. Reminders for our upcoming workshops will be released in the member update in the weeks leading up to them, so please check it out. I just want to take this opportunity to thank our 2 guest speakers and to all of you for attending our workshop today. We hope that you found it useful, and we will be circulating a feedback survey shortly for you to fill in, which really helps us to inform your views about our workshop today, as well as potential content for our upcoming workshops that we'll be running. So we'd really appreciate your input there. And as always, we're available via our email on bca@bca.org.au and via phone on 1800 033 660. So we thank you from an Eye to the Future team, and we hope that you have a lovely day.
That concludes today's webinar. You can find out more at eyetothefuture.com.au/home. An Eye to the Future is an initiative of Blind Citizens Australia, informing, connecting, and empowering Australians who are blind or vision impaired.